Welcome to the Dallas chapter of the FileMaker Pro user group. We're glad to have everybody here in this new year as we're plugging along into February. We've got some exciting things going on today. We'll have our speakers introduced here in a little bit, but coming up next month, we're going to have FileMaker MCP come here, Matt Monroe, and I think Anthony and Brian will be teaching us and educating us. That'll be fun then. And then the month after, we'll have Glenn Cates is going to fly down from RSG Data to teach us about FileMaker snippets. So if you've ever done a WordPress data solution and you're used to using MySQL as the backend, well, you can use FileMaker as the backend with his snippets. So that's interesting. We actually have quite a full schedule through pretty much the summer, so lots going on. But thinking of summer, if you got your summer plans, August, the Full Access Conference has actually changed locations. So it's going to be early in August, that first week of August, and it's going to be back at the Jesuit Retreat Center, which is roughly close to San Francisco, and it should be a pretty good small unconference, so kind of like the old pause on errors type thing. They had a group last year that had about 50-something people in there that attended, heavily weighted by Claris people. Ryan even came to it last year. Maybe he'll come again this year. So if you want to hang out with some of the Claris gang, that'll be a good place to do. Speaking of Claris, I just found out this last week that Todd Geist is now working at Claris. That surprised me. He's the type that kind of suffers no fools, so we'll see how cautious Claris, slow-moving meets Todd Geist, he moves fast and forward, but he's the type of development person that I can appreciate. I think it'll benefit those of us in the community big time. So I'm going to have up next is Mike Linett, Zerowait. If you need hardware that is the next level beyond your consumer type stuff that so many of us have done, and you don't want to do stuff in cloud, or you want to have the performance locally, Mike, come up here and tell us about Zerowait. By the way, they are also sponsoring our lunch today. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for having me here again. I recognize a bunch of you. I had a lot of laughs. So today's presentation from Harmonic focuses on successfully integrating AI into their customer business and leveraging Claris FileMaker's toolset and their own programming expertise, which is pretty amazing. Harmonic took a proactive step. But they partnered with Zerowait engineering team to deliver an enterprise-grade hardware solution tailored for their customers' needs, safe, secure, and local AI. And now, as this group of experts knows, when FileMaker works great, it's great. But when it gets overloaded, it struggles, and everyone feels it. FileMaker does not provide much guidance for enterprise server design, especially when you care about performance, snapshots, recovery, replication, virtualization, and now AI workloads. And that's where Zerowait comes in. We designed FileMaker optimized simple store performance energized platforms that combine Proxmox virtualization, ZFS, and FileMaker, built especially to remove bottlenecks, secure your data, and simplify operations. Our store PE solutions are custom built for each FileMaker enterprise environment, and our simple converged server becomes your secure cloud in a box, cutting complexity and costs. We deliver turnkey, reliable, scalable hardware, high-performance platforms ready for today and tomorrow. And thanks, you're going to have a great presentation from these guys. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you. So welcome to the February FMPug. Hey AI, make me a form. Maybe that's Hey Al, make me a form, but I think it's Hey Al. So today we're going to showcase how we combined features of FileMaker, Claris Studio, and Claris Connect with AI to deliver a powerful web form solution for one of our clients. And this presentation is actually part 2 of a previous FMPug we did back in August of 2025. That presentation talked about how we did some custom authentication with Claris Studio, and we teased at the end of that the next phase of work we were going to deliver for a seamless user experience. That is what this presentation is about. Now, as we worked through that second phase of this project, iterating with the customer, we encountered 3 problems that needed to be solved to meet the customer's specific needs. So today we're going to talk through each of those 3 problems and show how we used an LLM and some of our own ingenuity to deliver a great solution. Now, to help me tell this story, I'm joined by Anthony, Nguyen, and Alex Jean was supposed to be here, but he is fighting bugs of his own today, feeling under the weather. But Anthony and Alex were the two primary developers on this project. So with that, let's get started. Now, our customer on this project is Independent Support Services, or ISS. They are a fiscal intermediary in the state of New York that helps administer a Medicaid program for individuals with developmental disabilities. And as such, there are a lot of compliance requirements that they have to meet. Now, as we mentioned back in August, ISS serves a public user base of more than 10,000 people, and they do so through a custom-built web portal that Harmonic built for them. And like many organizations, ISS has scores of various forms that they use to collect information from people to help administer that program. These range from name change request forms to authorization forms through various services and many more. Now, historically, Harmonic has built custom forms accessible from within that web portal, but that gets pretty expensive when you need to get developers involved for every single form. And like I said, ISS has scores of forms. So Claris Studio offers a great solution to this problem. It allows the customer to build their own forms and make them accessible to their stakeholders, which, to their benefit, frees Harmonic up to spend our time solving more complicated problems. Now, as stated, our goal for this project was to facilitate the customer to create and manage these forms on their own, to not need us. Additionally, the process of setting up a form so that it integrates seamlessly with the rest of their system needed to be simple and quick. Remember when I said how many forms ISS had to create and maintain? So that brings us to our first problem, which is generating merge text in Claris Studio. Now, why is this even a problem? Simply put, it's because the customer wanted to provide a pre-submission confirmation page on all of their forms in order to show the user the information they filled out they were about to submit. So we first tried to add a read-only version of the fields onto this validation page that you see, but the problem we discovered is Claris Studio only permits you to place a field as a field object one time on a form, which, makes sense. So if they enter it in one field object, you can't have another field object for the same field on a different page that's read-only, because then that field exists in two places. So the easy solution here is to display that data on the screen as merge text, right? Claris Studio gives us that ability. Nothing super fancy here. The problem, though, is that typing all of this out, as you can see, is rather tedious, especially if you have lots of fields to write merge text for. This can take a long time, not to mention any syntax or typing mistakes that you make along the way. And the customer needs to do this for a lot of forms. In this little video that should be playing, it is at 2x speed of what I did, right? So this just takes a long time, and you also have to learn the syntax. So we turned to Kelly. Kelly is the name and persona that we have given to ISS's AI assistant. We built a pretty lightweight solution that allows Kelly to generate all of that merge text for us. And now let's take a look at what that looks like. Within our FileMaker application, we enter the studio table name and field names, and then we can click go. And Kelly is going to generate all of that merge text for us. We can then copy that out of FileMaker, paste it into Studio, and just like that, we got a functional merge test. And we can test that by submitting a form, and we can see that merge text does exactly what we wanted it to do. Huge time saver. Now, how are we doing this? Well, we're just using FileMaker, using the generate response from model script step that they gave us last summer, and Claude Opus 4.5. But more importantly, how are we doing this privately? ISS is in a regulated environment and has a policy of never sending system data to a public AI service. So to explain how we did that, let me turn it over to Anthony.
Hi, Mike Yor. So, the backbone of the workflow that we built is in AWS Bedrock, Amazon's managed LLM service. I'm not here to pitch an ad for AWS or anything. We really went with it just because that's where our infrastructure is. And IFS has also signed a data safety agreement with them. It really just makes sense to stick under the Amazon umbrella. Bedrock also has the advantage of also not storing your chat, using your prompts for training, or distributing that data to third parties, which really addresses a lot of ISS's concerns. Now, FileMaker can't usually talk to Bedrock with the generate response from model script step. We can make API calls directly, but we lose a lot of the niceties of that script step. So to get around that, we built OTAB, a small proxy that translates OpenAI requests to Bedrock calls. With OTAB, you can just configure AI account pointing to OTAB and then use generate response from model, same as with GPT or Claude or whatever else FileMaker supports. And so now that we have our infrastructure set up right, let me pass it back over to Eric to see a brief peek under the hood.
The scripting for this is actually pretty simple. We're just using generate response from model, and this is the prompt that we're sending. You can see we're providing some general instructions, and then we're providing some detailed instructions on the syntax of the merge text. Put curly braces here, quote this like this, etc. And then we, at the bottom, so those last few lines of the calculation, we merge in the table name and field names that the user provided for us. And that's it. The LLM is able to take all of that as the prompt and give us exactly what we need. It's really that straightforward. And that brings us to problem 2, which is data fidelity and immutability. As a reminder, ISS serves a large user base through their portal and has a statutory requirement to retain documents for 10 years. So when it comes to these form submissions, we need to be able to see the data exactly as it was submitted for 10 years. A solution that we came up with from a prior iteration of this project was to create a read-only view in Studio for every form that the customer would create. That means that for every form, the customer would need to create 2 views, which are kind of like layouts in FileMaker. Now, this is fine if you only have to do this once or with a small number of forms, but it becomes an absolute nightmare once you need to do it with tons of forms and once you introduce form versioning. So in Studio, this can get quite unmanageable. Additionally, in order to direct users to that read-only view, we created a template in Claris Connect, template flow, that would generate a custom link and send that out as an email, and the customer would duplicate that template flow and then have to change 3 or 4 different places in that flow to make the whole thing work. In addition to setting up some calculated fields in the Studio tables themselves, this was very much not simple. It's tedious, time-consuming, difficult to maintain, and really easy to overlook something. Now, to demonstrate exactly what I mean about data fidelity, let's watch a brief video, a demo. So here we are in Claris Studio with a record that has been submitted. As you can see, the users made certain selections from a multi-select field type. Now, if we go in and edit the value list by changing one of those values, we, in effect, change the response the user provided. What's more is if we go in and remove one of those value list options, and you can see that all we're left with is a UUID that maps to nothing. So we have no idea what the user submitted. This is a problem in a regulated environment where we need to keep accurate records. So after we reported a feature request for value list versioning to Claris, we started thinking, how else could we solve this problem? We discovered that Studio in each record is sending the entire schema definition and record data in one JSON payload that Claris Connect has access to. So you can see here, there's the field definitions, the value list options at the time, the exact data these are entered, tons of information that's super helpful. So we thought, well, what can we do with that? So we wrote a really simple Claris Connect flow triggered by a new record in Studio, and it takes that payload and writes it into a separate database that we have control over. This allows us to preserve that record data exactly as it was when it was created. Additionally, this new Claris Connect flow is drastically simpler than our previous one. Notice the previous one had 3 or 4 places that the customer had to edit, and this new flow has one place. So it's much more robust. All the customer has to do is duplicate the flow, change the one thing, and then click save. And that one thing that they're changing is which Studio table should trigger this Connect flow. That's all they have to do. Then that brings us to problem number 3, which is reproducibility. So now that we have this record data stored as JSON in a database, how do we make that readable, usable, and helpful in some way? So how do we make it readable without writing custom code for every single form? And to help answer that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony.
First thing we do is write some custom code. It's great that LLMs can put together web templates, put together code fairly well. Perfect. It's generally not a good idea to let LLMs generate code unchecked. Like, new security horror stories from sloppy LLM generated code come out almost daily. So that said, LLMs are surprisingly good at following patterns and composing web templates. If we give it some instructions to follow, it can do that instead of generating like raw HTML and CSS. And that ends up being safer because we're a little bit more in control of what's being executed. So our solution was to define a locked down component library with clear descriptions, exact syntax, and allow data types. We feed it the component catalog with the form submission that you saw earlier as context, and it responds with essentially use this component for that field. And really, that's it. It's way more safe and predictable and plays towards the LLM's strengths. And we'll see that in the demo that Eric will show you guys.
So we've got an interface in FileMaker where you can chat with the LLM and preview the template over on the right. And if we want to make changes to this template, we can make that request in natural language. So here we're going to ask it to reorder some things for us. And the LLM is going to take that request, combine it with the rules and guardrails we just gave it, and generate a modified template. We can then save and publish those changes, and then view that template being used on the customer's portal. There we go. So now we're on the customer's portal. Let's see that. Click. And now we see that template being used for real data on the portal. So let's take a look at how really pretty straightforward the code on this is. So again, we're just using generate response from model, and this is our prompt. So you can see we're providing some clear instructions about what we want the LLM to do. At the top, in that second line, we're going to merge in that component library, those component definitions that Anthony talked about. And then at the bottom of the prompt, we're going to provide sample data of that JSON payload that we've stored in the database. And all put together, this is what that looks like. So altogether, once all that is merged in, it looks like this. You can see for each of those components, we're providing the code, we're providing a description, some instructions. There are our instructions that we just saw in the prompt. And then at the very bottom, we've got that JSON object as context for LLM. So this solution that we built is now live in the customer's production system, and they've already created their first 6 or 7 forms without our help, which is great. We've also recently just launched a new module for this customer that empowers their stakeholder to chat with Kelly, the AI assistant, about their internal business rules, their policies and procedures, software and system documentation, applicable government regulation, and more. Hopefully, all of this inspires you and gets you thinking about the creative ways you can use Claris's products and AI to solve your customers' problems or your own. Or alternatively, you can hire Harmonic to help you. Now, I think what's really cool about what we've done here is we're using the tools Claris has given us to augment the functionality of Claris's own products, which is really exciting. Now, if this presentation whetted your appetite and you want to learn more about this project or about how Harmonic is leveraging AI, I encourage you to take a look at some of our previous FMPug events and join us for future events. Like I mentioned back in August, Steve and team presented on part 1 of this studio project. Back in November, Paul and Matt presented on leveraging local LLMs inside your FileMaker database. And we've also done a couple presentations on creative ways to leverage vector embedding and semantic search. We've got more things planned for future presentations, like next month, we're going to be talking about Claris's MCP, which is pretty cool. If you've got any further questions, drop us an email or call us. We'd love to hear from you. Also, don't forget to use this QR code to fill out the FMPug survey. We'd love hearing your feedback. The links to those prior FMPugs will be in the link below. It's in the description. Smash that like button, whatever they say.
We are going to open up to questions in just a second. I wanted to throw out a scenario, as mentioned by Anthony and Eric, that the resources we used in this research and in this project involved Claris Studio, which is a cloud resource and at the moment only available in the cloud. However, we used Amazon Bedrock, which is another cloud resource, and we use a Docker server in that particular instance to run OTAB and other things, and that is a virtual machine in AWS. All very cloud service basis. But what does it look like if we can't have these cloud resources? What does it look like if we need to run LLMs and run things like that locally and we cannot use cloud resources? So I want to ask my friend to come up and chat with me real quick from Zerowait. This is Chris Mire, and he has a lot of experience in basically creating server resources that are located locally and in a very performant manner, not just FileMaker server stuff, but all kinds of stuff. What if we were to want to take the resources we used in this project? Again, FileMaker server, Amazon Bedrock, a Docker server. What would that look like? How would we create a hardware platform for that?
So what you could do is you could take that and put it in a performance enterprise system. So you could take that, virtualize it, and you can still have all of the same variances that you have in the cloud, but you have them safe, secure, and local. So you could do something like one of our simple store boxes and put a hypervisor on it like Proxmox. And within that, you can have any amount of GPUs, CPUs, a whole boatload of memory. You can create and provision that however you want. So you can have something that's set aside for your FileMaker stuff. Then you can have GPUs and those resources allocated for a bigger AI box. And it makes it very simple to be able to reallocate and re-resource anything that you need.
Yeah. So I think what's important to pull from what you just said is that you're looking at not just a server
Correct.
that sits in the corner, but it is actually a platform
It is.
that allows you to virtualize a bunch of servers.
It is. You can do Windows, you can do Unix, you can do really anything you want to. It's going to look and feel just like what you're used to in the cloud, but it's their local. So if you got SEC Fed, any kind of other regulations that prohibit you from sending things out to the cloud or outside of your environment, this is the way that you do it.
Excellent. So I think and you mentioned tell me the platform again, Spnosor.
It's Spnosor. It's a performance enterprise.
Performance enterprise, yeah. So with such a box like that, we could have virtualized a VM for FileMaker server, and virtualized a VM for basically a Docker server for running our microservices. We could also have virtualized the VM necessary to run the LLM.
Right.
Provided, of course, you can download the LLM and fit it in the hard drive. Yeah.
Well, and you've even got the ability with Proxmox to do replication. So if you've got DR requirements, so you can have that information replicated down to a DR location, wherever that may be. So if that's something that's required, that's available as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's it. If we have questions in the crowd or online for Anthony and Eric, or if you have questions about hardware, please, this is the moment, this is the time, throw those out now. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. How long did you put into all this to creating these forms, you and Anthony? How long did it take y'all to do that? I know. Hey, Daisy, what are the invoices? Yeah, I guess y'all use that.
It took a little bit of iteration. We were already working on OTAP beforehand. I think like that already existed when Matt and Paul did Growler. And the second phase of the Claris Studio stuff maybe took a couple of months to figure out. It took a little bit of revising and iterating upon it.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't all development time. There was some of that was like iteration time as we were presented one option to the customer and got their feedback on it, and then we went back and tried to see how can we work around that problem or solve it or whatever. So there was the merge test thing. It was literally one day out, so I was trying to get a thing to work in Studio to solve one of the things the customer had brought up. And he brought up this limitation, and I was like, I wonder if we can just use AI for this, right? And so he pulled up L Studio locally on his Mac and just threw some stuff at it to see, hey, could we get this to work? And it was super straightforward. So we said, okay, great, then that's the path that we're going to do for this. And then I think the complexity is just how do you set up the infrastructure and all that type of stuff to make sure that it is scalable and secure enough for a production environment.
Similarly, like with components that we use with LLMs to generate the form views, it maybe took a day or two to like just put together a rough concept and get something working, but then like the rest of the time is really just building workflows and infrastructure around that to have a chat that can take user inputs and take those components and show them on screen. So yeah, a lot of work was done to make it presentable and easy to use.
I want to piggyback on that real quick because it's a good question, and I specifically was struck because we got to get a front row look at where the prompt ended up. I'm curious about how much time you guys spent tinkering around with the prompting, and how much time would the newbie take or expect to spend doing this prompt engineering to basically get the LLM to spit this out in the form that you guys needed it.
I think it's pretty quick. Building upon it. Yeah. Wow.
3 years. That'll do.
Well, I was born roughly. So I think like beforehand, I had already had a good idea of what an LLM is capable of, like what patterns I can use in prompting to get it to generate exactly what I needed. So like that initial prompt maybe only took an hour or so to have code working and have those components available to then like just prompt an LLM with. But it did take a little bit of time afterwards to refine it a little bit. Like it would, in some cases, like not fill out a required field. So it's, hey, this is required. You need to have this, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that after we got that proof of concept working, one of the things that we spent time doing, which we intentionally didn't go into in the presentation, was all of those components, that component library, is actually in a database. So when we merge that into the prompt, we're querying all that from a database to merge that in. So we had to make that part data-driven and dynamic. And then the part where we merge in the sample data, we had to make that part data-driven with a microservice to retrieve for us, provide us the sample data for the specific form that you were working on. So there were those things that we had to engineer and encode out to make it dynamic and data-driven, that sort of thing.
I also like intuitive just because the user is prompting for a template, like telling it to move stuff around as well. How do we render in real time that template for the user to know how things are ordered or laid out or whatever? And it does take a little bit of work on that side. It's not just using an LLM, like I said earlier. There is some supporting code around that, but it's not like super complex because we did use packages that were available to us that we use a portal that help in creating components and rendering components.
Heather, you had a question?
Yeah, so I actually have two. One is just a clarification, so I'll start with that one because it's, well, you showed us I would call it your draft, your V1 Claris Connect flow, right? And it was much more complex than what you ended up with. That's real clear. You raised the issue of lack of simplicity for our client to actually use it because of that, but you also referenced the thinking was we could duplicate this. You didn't say this, but the thinking was you have the two different views, right? The read-only, etc. I just want to clarify for those who haven't used Claris Studio that unlike FileMaker Pro, where you could just duplicate a layout after you're done, that is not an option.
Correct. Duplicating a view is currently not a feature available to us in Studio. We have made that feature request to Claris, but it is not currently available.
Right. So your ultimate solution was driven in part because of what we expect as developers who work with FileMaker Pro is that we're going to basically have those same options. And in fact, they're two different products and they're different.
Yeah, so we couldn't just duplicate, change a few things, then you're done. You got to rebuild the whole thing from scratch,
Right.
which takes a while.
So my question, unrelated to that, is you presented three problems. I think all developers have had the experience of not knowing that their delivery should include a feature or cover a circumstance or scenario that they weren't aware of at the onset. We're working on that. But at what stage in this particular project did you become aware of each of those problems?
We became aware of all those after we tried to deliver to the customer the first iteration, our first proposed solution, and to us it made sense. It was workable. It was a little intricate, but like it worked. And the customer looked at it and they said, for the amount of time that we have to put into this and maintain these forms ourselves, this is just not workable. It's too complex. It's not scalable enough for us. And then they brought up the problem that we solved with the merge text, that wanting that confirmation page, brought up a few other things with the form versioning. It was really after we had shown the customer the first pass that they said, well, but what about this and this?
So you felt like you were nearing the finish line. You built this thing, it did what you thought it was supposed to do, and then you had to go back to square one on something, right?
Yeah, we just had to figure out how do we make this even simpler and easier for Tesla.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
For Alex.
Who's going to channel Alex?
You can just send an email to Alan.
You guys had mentioned that Claris Studio had some of these rough edges, and I know Alex has spent an enormous amount of time in front of Claris Studio and been our point of the spear in figuring some of these things out. Are there any big other areas of Claris Studio that kind of fit this same, this isn't the easiest process to complete, and in those other areas, are there additional areas that Claris Studio could use some of this style of improvement? In other words, feeding a question or a problem to an AI agent, prompting it, getting responses back that can aid in Claris Studio to rolling out any form or product. I think there's two that I would call out. I'm sure Alex would have different thoughts on this. One of them is having a better way to determine for a given view or form, what are the other views that Studio has that are based on that same table. And Studio doesn't really have a way to query for that. You have to go in, navigate to the table in the data section, and then look in the URL to find the ID of the table and pull that out. It would be really nice to be able to somehow associate in a more automated fashion two given views that are based on the same table. The second thing that I would say is somewhat related to the duplicate view option, but it's the being able to have and apply consistent styling from two different views. So as we were going through building these read-only views, and you want all of them to look the same, have the same customer styling, and the logo is positioned in the same place, and this is in the same place, there's no way to do that automatically. You have to go in and position all of those things yourself, eyeball it best you can.
Templating.
Yeah, there's no templating. And there's not even in the FileMaker object inspector panel, there's at least the dimensions and coordinates of the selected object. So you could get that positioning right. To my knowledge, I've spent more time in Studio than I have, we don't even have that in Studio. So you can't even write down the coordinates and then go to the other view and put them there. So I think that difficulty in replicating styles and templates, and that you particularly get into that in custom views.
Yeah.
For things like form views or list detail views, Kanbans, some of those pre-built, really useful views, those are easy, but once you get into the custom views, then it gets a little messy.
And then there's also displaying data, especially like the right data filtered down to the right record. I think Alex has had a good amount of difficulty just showing data. Like in the Studio, feels like it's been built as here's a way to easily create forms, but then if you want to go back and access those forms and show the right person what they submitted, well, that it breaks down pretty fast.
Yeah.
Is why we did the whole merge text thing, because you can't have the same field on a different screen, in two places. And you have to create that. You have to create that field and put in stuff like those fields as variables.
Yeah, so the tricky thing there was getting a custom view, giving someone a link to a custom view that would show them only one specific record rather than a bunch of records. And we were able to get that work. Alex was able to get that to work using undocumented functionality of Studio. It's fully supported, but he was only able to figure this out by emailing back and forth with Claris. Oh yeah. So there's this property, and if you add a parameter in the URL structured like this with this key, whatever, then it'll work this way. But that's not in the public Claris Studio documentation. But it's a little, I wouldn't say it's finicky, but it's one of those things that all the I's have to be dotted and T's have to be crossed for it to work right. Yeah. And for this solution where it wasn't us developers building a thing, it's going to be the customer building and maintaining these things, we really needed it to be less fragile than that. Yeah.
Everything you're talking about is presentation of the form. as I see things going in the next few months and years, essentially AI agents are going to be filling out forms and reading documentation. So we're trying to build our own web page now to be able to be mostly text, but the AI can munge in and figure out who we are. How are you, if you're spending so much time on the development of the images, when the AI is going to be just text driven, how are you going to optimize the AI at the same time? Images. Your forms are all images. Colors and stuff. That's not important. Because all the AI is going to want to go through that if it's filling it out is the information.
Styles?
Yeah, I'm not sure what colors you're referring to.
Well, I saw a form up there.
The back.
None of the information on a form is important to an AI reading data. So if the AI is putting the information into your records years from now, how are you accommodating that?
I think that's pretty good at reading like Markdown and HTML. And so I think if it can straight the source code, it probably can format an insert package. But I do also think that there's going to be a holding monitor. Like we're not going to inspect it.
Everything we're
The angle on yours is it's also HIPAA data. It's restricted data for eyes only, not for everyone, isn't it?
yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the data we're storing is text. Like the forms we're presenting, they are text. The components that we've created, they're in the end just rendering HTML, not any image format. So on the Claris Studio side, that should be text, and on our side, that is definitely text.
I guess if I've been watching training interviews with Elon lately about robots. He's talking about robots for healthcare. So if the robot's doing healthcare, what the robot cares? A blue form or a green form? It doesn't care. It's just not with the day-to-day. That's what I'm trying to get. How are you going to automate connect steps so that when it's not a human interface, it's automation doing it?
Here's we may cross that bridge. We can correct something for the future. But join us in September where we go.
Well, I'm sure future Anthony will have his mission.
Yes.
All right, one last question I have for future Anthony. We're having a lot of fun with the GitHub tool. We're putting it into places and all that. Putting it in use in a lot of different places. It's becoming quite useful as an intermediary tool for FileMaker to use its native calls in arenas that don't have open API endpoints. But just, Anthony, if you could take just a moment and speak to what kinds of things we expect to see in the future for FMPug.
AI and LLMs are moving incredibly fast, so it's a little bit difficult sometimes to keep up, but as things come out, we've been adding features to it. So like initially it was just to talk to LLMs from FileMaker, and then we thought, how do we have it use a vision model from FileMaker? Well, it's super nice to be able to take an image from a compare field and send it off to a vision model and read text off of it. And then pretty recently, we added the ability to support tool calls to OTAD. So really, I don't know what the future will bring, but I would like to try to keep up with all the stuff that's coming out with that. So whenever it gets to a good place, we'd like to be able to open it up and share it with everybody. Right now, it's like a work in progress tool.
Yes, Alex, who is joining us while he is working through his own bug, to answering the question of what features he would like to see in Studio. I told you he would have something different than that. Because he would like to be able to drop in like pure web code into like where we were typing in the merge text before. He'd like to be able to just drop in HTML, CSS, JavaScript right in there. And that might help solve some of the problems, have that additional flexibility, that additional escape hatch. Okay, like here's this syntax that Studio reads, but also, can I just put HTML in here and it do what I want? Yeah.
Yeah. At the very least, you can do maybe a little bit of custom CSS and a little bit of custom JavaScript. You can open up quite a bit, bring up a little window or something to hide some of the fields. That would be really nice.
Yeah. And then I would also say that feature for versioning or pattern controls on value list options. So if you are about to change one of the value list options, it could tell you, hey, there are records that currently reference this. Are you sure you want to change this? Or just won't let you change it. Particularly if you remove an option, that there are records that are using that option. Gosh, it might be nice for it to tell you, hey, you're about to remove a reference here and there's no reply. So things like that.
That sounds like what you're describing as akin to, not the same, but akin to the option that we currently have for the formatting of a field, right? So let's say we've got a number field. We can select the format for a number to be currency or decimal and how many decimals or those options. And the as entered option is what you'd like to see for displaying historic data.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
And it's not Studio has dropped the ball here. It's that Studio makes it really easy to get in and edit the schema definition of a table. And so when you hand that over to somebody, we could break all the same things by going into manage database or going into the various meta tables and deleting records and changing values. It's the same problem that when you give someone schema level access to stuff, it's really easy to break things or destroy data in some way. And I think Studio, in how easy it is to use, it makes it easy to make those changes without you realizing the ramifications of what you just looked. Right. So,
Yeah. Like, for example, just changing the label for a field in Studio will also change the name of the field, like the actual in the table in the field. And that's not immediately apparent to anybody using it. Well, on the subject of stuff that would be nice, it'd be pretty nice to have row-level security in Studio. It would solve the need for filtering data down to just a record somebody submitted, because if you make it so that the row is only viewable by the user that submitted it, well, then no filters needed. They can only select those rows.
yeah. John also requests that we would like to be able to load a Studio view in an iframe,
Oh, yeah.
which you currently can't do. So that'd be nice to do. And a lot of these features and stuff, they're not impossible things to do. There are some of Claris's competitors out there that have done products that have some of these features, but they've also just been around longer, so there's been more development time on those products. So I don't really see any of these things as like end of the road. Studio's never going to be able to do this. They're constantly adding features. I remember when we first, back in September, October, tried to hand this off to the client the first time, we got on the call with them. We were walking through Studio, and there in Studio was a feature that wasn't there 2 weeks ago when we finished writing the standard operating procedure that we were going to hand off to the customer. Or like, well, now that feature's there, you don't have to do this. So Claris is putting in a lot of effort to augment Studio and make it better and increase the things that it's able to do. And in the Claris Studio interface, there is a very nice feedback button where you can send in bug reports or feature requests or that sort of thing. And we've been making use of that, sending in feature requests as often as they arise.
We have used Claris Connect for some other projects, but based solely on your experience with this project, the same question as earlier about Claris Studio, are there features or issues with Claris Connect based on your experience with this?
It's not always obvious the timing that Claris Connect fires off when a form is submitted. I think there have been a few times where we're trying to show something to the customer or do something ourselves, like we would set up a flow against the studio table and go through and submit stuff, and then it doesn't seem like anything is happening. In some cases, it's like we have to remove the flow and try again. So it'd be nice just to have a execute flow immediately, I think, against a specific record, but otherwise, it's nice.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is Claris has made an effort to make their Connect product user-friendly. Of course, there's a variety of different users. So the user to whom they are making it friendly is not so much a hardened developer. So the interface is very point and click, very GUI. There's not just, for instance, if you want to, in a one step of the flow, declare a variable or reference something from a previous step, you have to add an explicit new step, reference a variable, choose from a drop down where what it's referencing, and then go where you want to go and reference a step 4, which if you're a developer, you just want to write the text because you know what you're doing. It takes a little bit longer, but I think for the target market, it's rather friendly to use.
I think on that line of thinking also, it'd be really nice to have some sort of API access to Connect. Just as we can automate the creation of flows perspective. Because if somebody creates a new form from Studio, we don't necessarily want the user to have to go into Connect and also create a flow.
Right.
It would be nice to just have something programmatically create that flow for them.
Yeah, that sounds logical for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.